What is up, Sleep Tribe? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Healthy Sleep Revolution. My name is Dr. Meghna Dassani. You guys do not want to miss today. But before we jump into our chat with our guest, a quick reminder for my doctors, for my dentists listening in, do not forget to sign up for the Airway is Life Summit happening September 8th and 9th right here in H-Town at Space Center, Houston. Don't miss your chance to get early bird pricing before you end up having to pay full price. And let us jump into introducing our guest today, Dr. Vaish Sarathy. She goes by Vaish. That's what everybody knows her as. She is a functional nutritionist, and I'm not going to waste precious minutes by reading her resume, which is certainly impressive. I'm going to post all of it in the show notes so you guys can read up on her. I will also have her links to her bio, her website, every which way you can contact her, connect with her podcast as well, actually, and on social media. So welcome, Vaish. It is so good to have you.
Thank you, Meghna. Good to see you again.
I know it seems like it's been a minute since we've chatted, but I guess because I follow you on social media and keep up with all of the cool stuff that you do. So tell me, what is a functional nutritionist? What does it even entail? What is your focus?
That is a great question. It's actually one of my favorite questions to answer. And I will start it off with a little bit of an example. So everybody knows what a nutritionist does, hopefully. I like to start off by contrasting with what is traditionally the role of a nutritionist, which is to make sure that you get your macronutrients, which is fat, fiber, and protein accordingly. And sometimes, hopefully, your nutritionist is also looking at your micronutrient intake and how that relates to your development. And by micronutrients, we mean vitamins and minerals generally. A functional nutritionist is not just looking at what you're eating, but how you're absorbing what you're eating or what that's doing to you, or whether you're even able to digest, metabolize, and assimilate the nutrients that you're taking in. For example, one example I often like to give as an analogy is that if you're looking at a child with, let's say, failure to thrive or struggling with growth, a conventional nutritionist might insist on more calories or more protein. And generally everybody goes in with what is it? Is it Pediasure? That's the latest thing. So,
I guess that's one of the brands,
have so many gallons of Pediasure per day and all of that. But a functional nutritionist might be looking at it from this angle, is that, okay, I see that you are eating some protein and you are eating some nutrients. Why is your child's body not absorbing these nutrients? So let's go a little bit deeper. Let's look at digestion. Let's look at metabolism and so on.
Perfect. So this is a perfect segue into gut health. I know when you and I spoke, we kind of touched upon it. We are both super passionate about it. Mm-hmm. Touch a little bit upon gut health, and because we are the Healthy Sleep Revolution, how does that impact our sleep, that of our children's sleep, and what's the connection?
Every connection, right? So because when we start with the gut, everything is impacted from there. So your primary route of intake into your body, unless we're injecting substances directly into our bloodstream, which hopefully we're not, right? Our primary route of intake is the gut. So everything that is, and by the gut, I mean, we're starting like this entire column, which is technically outside your body. So we're starting with your mouth and ending it in your rectum. And this entire passageway is your gut. So a lot of times people think we're just talking about the small intestine, and that is actually not the case, because absorption and assimilation can happen in all of these areas from the mouth to the rectum. And so if we're not digesting food well in any of these areas, this can lead to so many things, but it can definitely start off by leading to inflammation of the gut. And that is a super vicious cycle, because gut inflammation in kids, and are we talking about everybody, or are we talking just specifically
about
kids?
Everybody can benefit.
So, okay.
I'm like sitting here hanging on by the edge of my seat, like absorbing every word, like making notes. So you guys better listen up.
Yeah. So and as you know, I work a lot with kids, so you might see these references coming up, but honestly, like, the gut is the gut, whether you're a kid or an adult. So in kids, you may see this manifest as picky eating, because the process of eating starts becoming difficult. It starts becoming painful. It's inflammatory, right? So the instinct is to not eat, right? So so inflammation can also result. Inflammation is an immune reaction, and inflammation can further make immune reactions worse, because when your gut is inflamed, we can go to something called intestinal permeability, which is commonly known as leaky gut. And when that happens, you're seeing molecules in your bloodstream that your blood would normally not see. And that leads to your immune system responding to these molecules. And we're talking about food allergies. We're talking about environmental allergies. We're talking about a very confused defense mechanism in the body. And overall, we're talking about discomfort. So all of this can lead to pain. It can lead to discomfort. And we all know what allergies feel like. We all know what external inflammation feels like. Internal inflammation can feel 10 times worse. We also know that the gut is connected to the brain by this nerve called the vagus nerve. And so the brain is also connected to the gut by the same nerve. So it's up and down. And any inflammation in the gut, we know, will result in neuroinflammation. And from there, it's directly related to sleep. It's not just the discomfort of not being able to fall asleep, because if your body's not comfortable, you can't fall asleep. But once you start hitting neuroinflammation, and even from the level of the gut, a lot of neurotransmitters are relevant in the gut and there are even created in the gut. So you have imbalance of neurotransmitters. So there is another connection to sleep. With chronic inflammation, sleep is almost always an issue. So we're not just looking at digestion, we're looking at immune reactions. We're looking at an inflammatory cascade in the gut and in the brain that can result in pretty much any chronic disorder. We now know that all chronic disease goes back to, is related backwards to inflammatory condition. When I say backwards, I mean upstream to inflammatory conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So much. And, we are constantly talking about, even on the podcast, about how you are in sympathetic overdrive when your sleep is impacted. And guess what? Nerve plays a huge role in tipping that balance for us to have a higher parasympathetic tone. It's the vagus nerve. So there you go. There's like something that every single parent, I talk about it to all my patients, all the parents. So that's a super huge takeaway. And I know that, getting this gut health to where we need it to be starts with eating the right way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just how much you eat, but also what you eat. And breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
the meal of champions, right? And
Yes.
we'll talk about that very cool challenge you have going on just in a little bit. But let's talk about the importance of, and I know it's like everything interrelated, importance of breakfast in regulating our blood sugar, which plays a role all through our day, and how all of this ties in with our sleep as well.
We talk about blood sugar as in functional nutrition, we talk about blood sugar as the first domino in a series of dominoes. If you look at the other dominoes, whether you're thinking of them as hormones or neurotransmitters, our blood sugar is the first domino. So when our blood sugar is not stable, it's really, it makes no sense even to talk about further downstream things. And talking about healing the gut, talking about inflammatory conditions, talking about brain health, none of those matter. So in all of the courses I teach and all of the clients that I work with, the first thing is, how is your blood sugar? And by that, we mean like whatever food we eat, almost all foods have an impact on our blood sugar, but we're looking to minimize this impact. So instead of having a quick peak or a quick rise in blood sugar followed by a quick fall, we want to make this a slow rise followed by a slow going down. So instead of in a few minutes going up and down, you want to kind of stretch it out. And so there's multiple ways to go from this conversation. But the first thing I want to talk about is that the easiest way to do this by making sure your meal doesn't have too many simple carbs, is full of complex carbs, has fat, fiber, and protein. So that's the technique. That's what you do to get it. But
no Pop-Tarts for breakfast for me
exactly.
tomorrow.
Please, no Pop-Tarts for breakfast, no cold cereal and milk and all of that, right? So cold cereal is a big offender, as are Pop-Tarts. But if you look at a quick rise in blood sugar and a quick drop, both of these are associated with almost every symptom we talk about in ADHD, everything. So whether we're talking about impulsivity, whether we're talking about hyperactivity, low blood sugar, you would think people assume that high blood sugar is related to hyperactivity. When blood sugar crashes, a lot of children misinterpret is not the right word. A lot of children react to this drop in blood sugar with hyperactivity. And it's counterintuitive to adults because adults crash. You feel sleepy, you feel tired. Even with high blood sugar, you can crash. For me, when I respond, the way I respond to high blood sugar is I crash. I have like intense fatigue. I need to go and take a nap. But kids can respond with hyperactivity, with impulsivity, with loss of focus in that period where the blood sugar is falling down. And a lot of times if your child is going to school and in the morning you're, these are what I hear, like my child's falling asleep in school or my child is active in school, opposite ends of the energy spectrum, but might be related to the same thing. Or my child's not paying attention in the mornings. It depends on when your child's not paying attention. You always want to look at the last meal and see how that relates to how that impacts your child's blood sugar. So every one of these symptoms, sleep too, right? So especially staying asleep. Now, falling asleep is one thing, but staying asleep is very dependent on if your dinner is a pretty high sugar meal. And if your blood sugar dips in the night, you can wake up. So many things are related to blood sugar. But I feel like a lot of symptoms of ADHD are, this is such a low-hanging fruit. Because as opposed to healing the gut, which is a pretty long-term process, and I mean, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of perseverance to be on that path. But stabilizing blood sugar doesn't take any of that. You start with tomorrow's breakfast. That's it. Yeah. And you can't start with lunch. Okay. You have to start with breakfast because when you start the yo-yo going with breakfast, if you have a Pop-Tart for breakfast and your blood sugar is already in this thing, it's very hard to stabilize midway during the day. But it's just one day. The next day you can start with breakfast again, which is very different from, like I said, a gut healing protocol. They're both important, but the reason I start with blood sugar is because the impact is immediate. You don't have to wait for a few months. The impact is immediate and few days, right? And also it's, like I said, it's an easy thing to address.
Wow. I'm like frantically taking notes here because, I'm constantly talking about our kids with ADHD. A lot of them have the misdiagnoses. I know when you and I spoke too, we talked about it. Have we addressed their sleep? Have we figured out, do they have fragmented sleep? Are they getting enough rest? And then now you tie in this, it's almost a tripod. You tie in blood sugar, the highs and the lows. And let's look at what their last meal looks like. And unfortunately, in our American Western diet, every meal ends with dessert, ends with ice cream. Most of these kids look forward to, what am I going to have after dinner? And I'm going, oh my God, no. So it is so fascinating to see all this come together. And we don't even have to worry about CGMs or anything, right? For kids, just start tomorrow. Let's hit the reset button tomorrow morning at breakfast, right?
Absolutely. With exactly. I mean, and CGMs are great for, people that are really struggling with this chronically, but with kids, your symptoms are in your face. And we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for that. At least in this case, we're not. We're really looking to see results. And it's, like I said, it's really easy. High blood sugar can impair the ability of your brain, specifically this area called the hippocampus, to react to stress. So the other thing with high blood sugar is it impairs decision making from the get-go. So once you start on that dominant, that's another reason why it's important to start with a blood sugar balancing breakfast, is that the minute you're on that sugar yo-yo, your every other food decision is based on that. When you're in that blood sugar low, when you're in the valley, it's very hard to make a sensible decision at that time. It's like, now I'm going to have, I don't know, like an avocado or a salad, and that's not going to happen. You're going to reach for a donut, you're going to reach for coffee, or your child is going to reach for a donut and a soda or something like that, because and if you think your impulse control is low, you can imagine that children have a harder time with that. And we're kind of setting them up. When parents come and say that, oh, my child always wants a donut or something like that, what was the last thing they ate? So that's why, again, breakfast, because there you have like a hard reset. In the morning, you can start right now because there's hopefully nothing. And it might take time. It probably will take time because in the morning, some kids don't want to eat. I'm actually working through that with my daughter, who suddenly has gone into an anxiety phase because she started, this is the first year of middle school, and anxiety impacts appetite. So in the morning, she's feeling nauseous. So sometimes you have to back up a little bit and work on anxiety before you can start with eating, but still breakfast.
I know, just hard reset right there. You are a double master's, you are a PhD. What took you down the path of getting into nutrition? Like what prompted this shift?
Working with my son. So my son is now 15 years old and he has a diagnosis of Down syndrome and autism. He is non-speaking, and he when he was young, he had a lot of gut issues. And at the time, I can't even imagine that time now, but at the time, I didn't even know that you work with nutritionists if you have gut issues. I didn't know that. I kept going to our PCP. And then when we didn't find answers, I didn't know that you could go to people that work in functional and alternative medicine. But I was working with a movement therapist who said that you need to see a naturopath. And then when I saw a naturopath, some of those things got answered. And then somebody said, you should see a functional nutritionist. And then I saw a functional nutritionist and I was like, oh, I need to do this long-term with my son. I need to learn this. And there was some biochemistry in there. I was like, I'm already a chemist. Like, how much farther is there? And the truth is, it is nothing related to chemistry eventually, but I'm glad I did it because I started training to be a functional nutritionist. And that was actually the best thing that I did because I not only was I able to make a lot of changes with my son, but I was also able to help other kids that came along because this is such an evolving field and there's so much to learn. And I'm grateful to be able to do that.
Yeah, that is amazing because I wouldn't have known where to look for answers or I'm in healthcare, I should at least know, and it's a similar journey with sleep for me. So I completely get it. And I'm so grateful you're doing this. Is there anything in common and I know we've kind of talked about this, but because I had a list of questions I wanted to go over with you, in how we can impact factors, foods that have commonality between our focus issues, kids in school. I have 2 teenagers, their moods, and then of course we have to time, sleep, and learning. So what is that commonality? How can we help impact all of that?
I to sound like a broken record, definitely start with stabilizing blood sugar.
Yes.
So once that is stabilized, the next step is, and so what are the things that we're talking about? Focus, mood, and sleep, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So a lot of these, and working with kids, I've realized that a lot of these have common upstream causes. And generally, pretty much everything ties into blood sugar and gut health and nutrient status. Okay. I usually, because gut health is a long-term thing, one of the things that I'm going to talk a little bit about sugar and this. While one aspect of consuming the amount of sugar that we do is blood sugar imbalance, sugar is a larger player. We know that the process of digestion of sugar creates nutrient imbalances and it can create pathogenic overgrowth in our gut. So we know that sugar is a multiple level player, right? So there's so many things. And there's this big misconception that children need sugar. Children need complex carbs. Okay. I don't suggest that everybody or anybody especially kids, don't go on a low carb diet or anything like that, especially not unless you've tried everything else and it's medically required at that time. But we definitely as a society confuse sugar with the need for slow digesting carbohydrates. And complex carbohydrates are generally anything that you find in whole foods, whole grains, nuts, seeds, root vegetables, lentils, beans, all of that. So backing up, if we're trying to look for common factors, the three common symptoms I look for in people when we're addressing moods is, have you stabilized your blood sugar? Is your child pooping well? And is your child sleeping well? Because almost everything else will manifest in these symptoms. Okay. So usually if these 3 are like stellar, then the chances are that your child is also learning well, that your child has stable moods. And if that turns out not to be the case, then you need to do a deeper dig. There is more that you can do from a functional nutrition perspective, but that is a personal rabbit hole that each person needs to go into, right? So, usually gut imbalances and nutrient imbalances will lead to a child not sleeping well. So making sure that your child is getting their 10 hours of sleep. If they're not, why not? So there's a lot of reasons why not, but if they're not, why not? And again, poop is like golden as an indicator for gut health. Is it foolproof indicator? No, I've known children with whose bowel movements are perfect. That's still, when you go ahead and do a lab test, you have like all sorts of pathogenic overgrowth, but it's rare. If your child has, if you know what a Bristol stool chart is, if you don't know, you can Google it. And then a perfect poop, I think that's a 4 or 5, if I remember, on the Bristol stool chart. If you have that kind of an indicator, it's not always easy to know because if your child is older, it might be an awkward conversation to have, but they could self-monitor and they could be, I think we need to kind of break away from the stigma of poop as well. So to actually know one to be able to self understand where you are at a digestive level.
At what age do you recommend that parents go down this rabbit hole with their children? Are we starting as newborns? Because whether they're breastfeeding or not, I'm assuming we're breastfeeding. It's what goes into mom's bodies that impact, but it does, right? Gut health. Mm-hmm. Where do parents start? What is your suggestion, recommendation?
Any age where you see a symptom. Yeah, any age where you see a symptom that feels like you need to address it right then, and it triggers alarm bells in your mind. This could be a baby that's struggling with colic for too long, right? So at that time, yes, you need to see gut health. At that point, the rabbit hole would be, what sort of food sensitivities are we looking at, right? That's what I would look at with the baby. And then if you see a child that is really struggling to sleep, I could, if you've already gone through the, screen time and the work that you do about your structural imbalances and so on, what nutrient imbalances are we looking at? How are they eating? If you have a child who's getting more and more progressively higher picky eater, if their picky level of pickiness or self-restriction is constantly increasing, that is when that would be like a hard stop for me to stop, because that's a very dangerous rabbit hole. At that point, it becomes a diagnosis of, it becomes a pathologic diagnosis. So what is it that should we, that's when you go down a rabbit hole. So whenever there is some level of variation that all our children have. So I don't suggest that everybody jump down a rabbit hole right away. But most moms and dads, most parents know that this isn't okay, but they're usually trying to lull themselves into a sense of okayness, is that, yeah, everybody struggles, but you know that it's not enough. It's not okay, that there's something going on. So that's when you start doing the detective work.
And it's as easy as starting with what you put for breakfast in your mouth, correct? Or in your child's mouth. And I know you have a ton of free resources. I'm going to kind of segue into that. You have a ton of resources because I was looking on your website, your social media, you're constantly sharing stuff. And then do you mind sharing about that challenge that you have going on? The
Power Breakfast.
Healthy breakfast, Power Breakfast. There we go.
Yes.
Challenge that parents can join.
Yeah, absolutely. I was doing different kinds of free challenges in the past, and I realized that why not start with where it's easiest to start and where we'd like people to start with. And that I'm calling it the Power Breakfast Challenge because I mean, it's both for parents and kids. Actually, anybody can do this challenge. But that's where you find your energy, your focus, and your power for the day. And the link is functionalnutritionforkids.com/power breakfast. So it's a free challenge. It's a 5-day challenge. I'll be sharing recipes and ideas to help you design a breakfast for your child that you can consistently continue with.
And then if parents need more help with this, you do work with clients one-on-one, is that correct? What is the best way for them to contact you, connect with you, reach out?
Go to my website. It's functionalnutritionforkids.com. And there's a work with me section there, you can find, I have a few courses also. So, and then, and you can also work with me one-on-one.
Perfect. So for our listeners, I will make sure to drop all of her links in the show notes. We'll have her social media handles, the website that she mentioned, the link to the challenge, the free Power Breakfast Challenge. I keep messing up its name. That way you guys can follow and actually get on the road to good gut health, ideal or close to ideal blood sugar, and see how that's going to help you guys and your families. Before we wind up our segment, what are your top 3 tips for parents?
My first tip is to really start off by adding 1 piece of protein to your child's breakfast. That could be a boiled egg. If you do lentils, if you do an Indian style breakfast of dosas, that could be that. It could be a mung bean dosa. Or it could just be a milkshake with some, when I say milkshake, some smoothie with either a vegan protein or a whey protein or something. Just add protein for breakfast. I would also suggest making sure your dinner has protein, because this can really stabilize your child's blood sugar while they're sleeping, and it can help just keep that steady. Finally, this is my last tip, is unrelated to gut health, is that regardless of whether your child's gut is healthy or not, regardless of how your child is functioning in school or how they exhibit intelligence, if you presume competence or assume intelligence in your child, that is really the first way to develop a trusting relationship both ways, and to make sure that your child can grow in the way that they want to. Because ultimately, I really don't believe in intellectual delays of any sort for any child with any diagnosis. So presume competence.
Since I have you, let's dive into presume competence, because that phrase caught my attention. And I know I said I was going to let you go, but I'll hold you on for a few more minutes. Dive into that a little bit more for me, please.
In the disability community, for years, we've had this idea of intellectual delay. And I say idea because we diagnose children with intellectual delay based on how they communicate and whether a child can speak or not. And as silly as this may sound, generally non-speaking children, like my son, are assumed to be non-thinking, which is stupid because the speech areas of the brain and the cognitive areas of the brain are completely different. Yet when a child has poor motor skills, which means they can't sign, they can't gesture, remember that the eye is a motor, and moving the eye is a motor activity. That's ocular motor. And therefore, they may have poor eye contact. And speech is extremely motor, fine motor. So when a child has poor motor skills, all of these are impacted. And communication is a struggle in multiple ways. And yet, none of these have anything to do with cognition. Cognition is not a motor activity. Thinking is not a motor activity. Millions of children with autism, with Down syndrome, with cerebral palsy, that all we know for truth is that they struggle with motor issues. We have diagnosed them without any proof with a label of intellectual delay. We don't provide them with an equal education. We don't speak to them with respect. We baby them. We dumb things down for them. And honestly, I know 14 and 15-year-olds that are still being taught to count from 1 to 15 because they have no way of telling you that this is not, that they got it 15 years ago. So this is criminal in my mind. And I'm also a teacher. I'm also a chemistry and math teacher, and I work with autistic kids. I have never met a single kid with an intellectual delay. My son has Down syndrome. He does not have an intellectual delay. I don't know. No, I think that we're just like overusing that label, and we can nutrition the heck out of our kids. But if we don't treat them with respect, you can't, I can give you the best food, but if I keep you closed in a room and just give you Jack and Jill books or whatever they call them here, you're not going to be happy. The road to happiness is, as a nutritionist, I'm saying the road to happiness is not through nutrition. It's not even through sleep. It is through growth and learning. And so, and until you presume competence, there is nothing in this world that you can do to help your child be happy, and for you yourself to be happy. Because when you see your child growing, even if they're struggling in their body, it doesn't have to be an either or. Hopefully you're doing both, right? So ideally it's not an either or. But if you had to choose, I would choose that it starts with the assumption. So when I say presume competence, you don't initially have any proof that your child is intelligent. So you have to start with assumption that we're assuming that my child is intelligent, and I'm talking to my child as though they are intelligent, and I'm teaching them my child as though they understand. And when you start talking to that side of your child, that side will start talking back to you. So I like to say this, that assuming intelligence reveals intelligence, and that's how it works. So, and that is like in like a few sentences, the long story behind my journey with my son. Because if by fluke I started assuming intelligence because I just saw it one day, and that's what my TEDx talk is about. It's called Who Decides How Smart You Are? And if that had not happened, honestly, we would have been nowhere, nothing. And there is, like I said, none of the other things can make up for someone treating you with trust, respect, and intelligence.
What a huge disservice to our children when we do not treat them with, like you said, the love, the respect. And if we don't, now I'm going to use it, presume intelligence.
Yes.
So thank you. I am so glad you're on the forefront of this, because every child needs a voice. Every child needs to be heard. Every child needs and deserves that education. Like you said, who gets to determine how smart you are? Yeah. So thank you. I truly, truly appreciate you taking the time coming on today and sharing this. For our listeners, do reach out to her, do follow her. And if there's any questions, she is one of the most responsive people I have had the honor of knowing. So she's on top of things, because as you can tell, this is her passion. As always, share this episode. This is some amazing information. I don't have to tell you guys this. And leave us a review. I will see everybody next time. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Vaishnavi.
Thank you, Meghna.